Good evening and welcome to Stories for Sleep, your bedtime guide to a peaceful and restful night's sleep. I'm Mary, your guide for tonight's sleep meditation, as we embark on a journey to discover the legend of the pea. As you settle into bed, take a deep breath in and exhale slowly, letting go of any stress or tension from the day. Imagine yourself transported to the kingdom ruled by a wise and compassionate prince and princess. They have a cherished legend that has brought joy and laughter to the people of the kingdom for generations. The legend began with a test to find a true princess, a test that involved a single pea placed under 20 mattresses. Only a true princess could feel the tiny pea through all the layers of bedding. The story spread far and wide, and people began to place small objects in their beds to see if they too were true princes or princesses. As you begin to relax, allow the legend of the pea to fill your mind. Imagine yourself drifting off to sleep with a sense of peace and contentment, knowing that you are worthy of royalty, just like the true princess who felt the pea all those years ago. Let the legend of the pea bring you comfort and joy as you drift off to sleep. Once upon a time, in a far-off kingdom, there lived a handsome and kind-hearted prince who was in search of a true princess to marry. He had grown up hearing stories of great love and passion, and he was determined to find a match who would share his values and beliefs. The prince was not just looking for someone who was beautiful and charming, but he wanted a princess who was kind-hearted, authentic, and had a heart of gold. He knew that the woman who would be his queen needed to have the right combination of qualities, including intelligence, compassion, and courage. He had traveled far and wide in search of the perfect match, but his quest had not been easy. He met many women, some of them were beautiful, others were intelligent and witty, but none of them seemed to be the perfect match for him. Some were too shallow, others too self-centered, and some lacked the qualities that he was looking for. Despite his disappointment, the prince never gave up. He remained committed to his quest, hoping that someday he would find his true princess. One day, a terrible storm hit the kingdom, and a young woman arrived at the palace seeking shelter. She was soaking wet, and her clothes were torn, but she had a kind heart and a gentle demeanor that caught the prince's attention. The woman was shy and hesitant, but the prince saw something special in her. He took her in, offered her a warm meal, and allowed her to rest in one of the guest chambers. As the night passed, the prince began to observe the young woman more closely. He noticed how she spoke with kindness and grace, how she moved with elegance and poise, and how her eyes shone with an inner beauty that was rare to find. The prince felt a spark of hope within him. Could this young woman be the one he had been searching for all along? The prince wanted to test the young woman's authenticity and ensure that she was truly sensitive and delicate. He ordered his servants to prepare a bed fit for a true princess, with 20 mattresses and 20 feather beds. It was a luxurious bed, and anyone would have been thrilled to sleep in it. But there was a catch. To test the young woman's sensitivity, the prince placed a single pea on the bottom of the bed, underneath all the layers of bedding. It was a tiny, hard little pea that would have gone unnoticed by most people, but the prince knew that a true princess would feel its presence. The young woman was grateful for the prince's kindness and hospitality. She was exhausted after her long journey and was looking forward to a peaceful night's sleep. She climbed up onto the bed and snuggled in amongst the soft, fluffy bedding. As the night wore on, the young woman felt something small and hard pressing into her back. At first, she tried to ignore it, thinking that it was just a wrinkle in the bedding. But the more she tossed and turned, the more she became aware of its presence. The young woman was puzzled. What could be causing such discomfort? She wondered if she was coming down with a fever, or if she had a strange rash. She tried to find a comfortable position, but couldn't seem to shake the feeling of something small and hard in the bed. The next morning, the prince asked the young woman how she had slept. To his surprise, she replied that she had slept terribly, and that she had been kept awake by something small and hard in the bed. The prince was thrilled. He knew that he had found his true princess, the one who was truly sensitive and delicate. The next morning, the prince approached the princess with a glimmer of hope in his eyes. He had placed a single pea under the layers of bedding, hoping that it would be enough to test the princess's sensitivity and prove her authenticity. He asked her how she had slept, and to his delight, the princess replied, "Terribly." The prince was thrilled. He knew that he had found a true princess, one who was sensitive and delicate enough to feel a tiny pea under all those layers of bedding. He asked her to describe what had kept her from sleeping, and the princess exclaimed, "There was something hard in my bed that kept me from sleeping. It was like a small, round pebble." The prince was amazed. He had thought that the pea might be too small to feel, but the princess had felt it despite all the layers of bedding. He knew that he had found his true princess, one who was not only beautiful, but also kind-hearted and authentic. As the sun rose over the kingdom, the prince took the princess by the hand and led her to a grand balcony that overlooked the lush gardens and sparkling fountains below. The birds sang and the breeze carried the scent of blooming flowers, adding to the already romantic atmosphere. "You have passed my test," the prince said, turning to the princess. His eyes shone with admiration and respect. "You are a true princess, and I would be honored to have you as my wife." He knelt before her, producing a velvet box that contained a magnificent ring. The princess gasped, placing her hand over her mouth in disbelief. She had never imagined that she would find such love and acceptance in a prince who valued authenticity and sensitivity. Tears of joy filled her eyes, and she could feel her heart racing with excitement. "Will you do me the honor of becoming my wife?" the prince asked, opening the box to reveal a dazzling diamond ring. The ring sparkled in the sunlight, a symbol of the love that the prince had for the princess. The princess nodded, still too overcome with emotion to speak. The prince stood up and slipped the ring onto her finger, the perfect fit. The wedding of the prince and the princess was a grand affair that was talked about throughout the kingdom for years to come. The palace gardens were decorated with thousands of flowers, and the air was filled with the sweet fragrance of blooming petals. The guests arrived in their finest attire, and the sound of music filled the air. The ceremony took place in the palace's grand ballroom, which had been transformed into a beautiful chapel for the occasion. The room was decorated with intricate floral arrangements and glittering chandeliers, casting a warm glow over the proceedings. The princess looked radiant in a flowing white gown, adorned with sparkling jewels and a delicate veil. She walked down the aisle on the arm of her father, her eyes fixed on the prince, who stood at the end of the aisle, dressed in a regal suit of armor. The prince looked at the princess with awe and admiration, his heart overflowing with love. He had never seen anyone as beautiful as she was, and he felt grateful to have found someone so kind and authentic. The ceremony was conducted by the kingdom's most revered priest, who spoke eloquently about the power of love and the importance of authenticity in relationships. The prince and the princess exchanged vows, promising to love and cherish each other for eternity. After the ceremony, the guests were led to a magnificent banquet hall, where they were treated to a feast of the kingdom's finest foods and wines. The room was decorated with candles and flowers, and a band played lively music that filled the air with joy. The newlyweds danced their first dance as husband and wife, twirling around the dance floor to the sound of the music. They looked into each other's eyes, filled with happiness and love. As the night wore on, the celebration continued, with speeches, toasts, and songs. The guests laughed and danced and drank, celebrating the union of the prince and the princess, who had found each other through the power of authenticity and true love. As the years passed, the prince and the princess grew even more deeply in love. They continued to demonstrate kindness and compassion toward each other, as well as toward their subjects. They worked tirelessly to make the kingdom a better place for everyone who lived there. The princess's attention to detail proved invaluable in governing the kingdom. She made sure that every decision was well thought out and carefully considered. Her authenticity and genuine concern for the well-being of the people earned her the love and respect of all who knew her. Together, the prince and the princess created a legacy of love and service that endured long after they were gone. They built hospitals and schools, funded research and innovation, and improved the quality of life for everyone in the kingdom. Despite their busy schedules, they always found time for each other, taking long walks in the gardens, enjoying picnics by the lake, and sharing quiet moments of reflection in each other's company. However, on the night of their 10th wedding anniversary, the prince woke up in a cold sweat. He had dreamed of the pea that had proved the princess's authenticity all those years ago. He realized that he had never thrown the pea away, and it was still somewhere in the palace. The prince got out of bed and began to search for the pea. He searched every nook and cranny of the palace, but it was nowhere to be found. Just as he was about to give up, he stumbled upon a secret passageway hidden behind a tapestry. The prince's eyes widened in surprise and excitement as he realized he had discovered a secret passageway in his palace. Without hesitation, he stepped into the dimly lit corridor and made his way through the winding twists and turns. As he walked, the prince couldn't help but wonder what secrets the passageway held. Had it been used by previous monarchs to escape danger or conduct clandestine affairs? He imagined the rich history of his kingdom and the many stories that were waiting to be uncovered. Finally, the passageway opened up into a small chamber, and there, in the center of the room, was the pea. The prince couldn't believe his luck. He had searched the entire palace, and it was only by chance that he had stumbled upon the hidden chamber. As he picked up the pea, the prince felt a sense of closure. He had lost the pea and been haunted by the memory of its loss for so many years, and now he finally had it in his hands. But as he turned to leave the chamber, he heard a faint sound behind him. Turning around, the prince saw a figure emerging from the shadows. It was the princess, who had followed him in secret, curious about his late-night wanderings. She looked at him with a mixture of surprise and amusement, and then noticed the pea in his hand. "Ah, the infamous pea," she said, a smile spreading across her face. "You know, my dear prince, I've always wondered why that pea mattered so much to you." The prince looked at her, feeling a twinge of embarrassment. He had never truly considered why the pea had held such significance for him. It had simply become a symbol of his search for an authentic and true love. "I suppose it was a test," he said finally, "a test of authenticity and of paying attention to the small details." The princess stepped closer to him, placing a hand on his arm. "But don't you see, my love? Our love is so much more than that. We have built a life together that is based on respect, trust, and understanding. The pea was only the beginning." The prince felt a weight lift from his shoulders as he looked into her eyes. She was right. Their love was not defined by a single test or challenge. It was a journey that they had embarked upon together, and that would continue for the rest of their lives. To mark their anniversary, the prince and princess decided they needed a break. They left the kingdom in the capable hands of their advisors and set off on a journey to see the world. The prince and princess traveled far and wide, experiencing different cultures, trying new foods, and meeting new people. They sailed across the ocean, visited far-off lands, and even braved the scorching desert. The princess was amazed by the beauty of the world, and the prince was happy to share it all with her. As they traveled, the prince and princess grew even closer, finding new ways to connect and deepen their love for one another. They shared stories around the campfire, danced under the stars, and gazed in wonder at breathtaking views. One day, they came upon a village that was celebrating a joyous occasion. The prince and princess were welcomed with open arms, and they were invited to join in the festivities. They danced and laughed with the villagers, enjoying the simple pleasures of life. As the night wore on, the prince and princess found themselves alone, standing under a canopy of stars. The prince took the princess's hand and gazed deeply into her eyes. 10 years ago, I knew you were the one for me, he said. And now, after all this time, I am more sure than ever. You are the love of my life, and I want to spend the rest of my days with you. Will you marry me again? Tears filled the princess's eyes as she nodded her head, unable to speak. The prince slipped a new ring onto her finger, and they shared a passionate kiss, feeling more in love than ever before. The next day they continued on their journey, holding hands and laughing as they walked. They knew that they had found true happiness in each other, and that nothing could ever change that. As the prince and princess continued their journey, they shared their story with anyone who would listen. They spoke to villagers, merchants, and travelers, and the legend of the pea and the sorceress spread like wildfire. People were fascinated by the story of the prince's test and the authenticity of the princess. They marveled at the power of a small pea hidden under layers of bedding, and they were inspired by the true love between the prince and princess. In some towns, people would gather around the prince and princess, eager to hear the story firsthand. The princess would tell the tale with passion, her eyes shining with excitement as she recounted the events of that fateful night. The legend of the pea and the sorceress became so well known that bards wrote songs about it, and artists painted portraits of the prince and princess. Children would play games pretending to be the prince and princess, and parents would tuck them in at night with an extra pea hidden under the covers, just for fun. Years went by, and the prince and princess eventually returned to their kingdom. As they entered the gates, they saw a large statue in the town square, made of gold and adorned with precious gems. It was a monument to their love, depicting the moment when the prince proposed to the princess on the balcony. The prince and princess were overjoyed to see their story immortalized in such a way, and they knew that their love would live on for generations to come. The legend of the pea and the sorceress had become a part of the kingdom's history, and the prince and princess were proud to have played a role in its creation. Now they'd returned home, happy to be back in their kingdom, but they couldn't resist having a little fun with the story of the pea. They commissioned a painting of themselves, with the prince holding a large cartoonish pea and the princess grinning mischievously beside him. The painting was hung in the grand hall of the palace, where it became the subject of much amusement and laughter. Visitors to the palace were often amused by the whimsical painting and asked the prince and princess about its meaning. The couple would always tell the story of the pea and the sorceress, but they added a new twist to it, claiming that the pea had grown to an enormous size after they had thrown it away. As the years went by, the painting became a beloved symbol of the couple's happy marriage and their sense of humor. It was even replicated in smaller versions and sold as souvenirs in the kingdom's markets. The story of the pea and the sorceress continued to be told for generations, always with a wink and a smile, and always with the knowledge that sometimes the most important things in life are the small details that make us unique and authentic. As the years went by, the prince and princess continued to reign over their kingdom with love and wisdom. The legend of the pea became a cherished tale for generations to come, but something strange started happening. People began to report strange occurrences in their homes at night. They would feel something small and hard in their beds, something that disrupted their sleep. At first, they thought it was just their imaginations, but as more and more people reported the same thing, the prince and princess grew concerned. They decided to investigate the matter and discovered something incredible. The story of the pea had taken on a life of its own. People had started placing small objects like marbles and pebbles in their beds to see if they were true princesses or princes. The tradition had become so widespread that people were doing it without even realizing why. The prince and princess were both amused and amazed by this discovery. They never expected that their little test with the pea would have such a lasting impact on their kingdom. They decided to embrace the tradition and turned it into an annual festival called the Pea Festival. Every year, people from all over the kingdom would come to the castle and participate in various games and activities related to the pea. There were pea throwing contests, pea and spoon races, and even pea juggling performances. The festival had become a beloved tradition that brought people together and reminded them of the importance of authenticity and attention to detail. The prince and princess were overjoyed to see their kingdom thriving with such positivity and unity. They knew that they had left a lasting legacy that would be cherished for generations to come. And as they watched the festival goers laughing and having fun, they couldn't help but feel grateful for the little pea that had started it all. The legend of the pea had become deeply ingrained in the culture of the kingdom. It was retold at every celebration, from birthdays to weddings to the anniversary of the prince and princess. Children would gather around the storyteller, wide-eyed and eager to hear the tale of the true princess who could feel a pea through 20 mattresses and 20 feather beds. It had become a beloved tradition, passed down from parents to children, from grandparents to grandchildren. But it wasn't just a story. The legend of the pea had become a part of people's lives. When someone was preparing for an important event, they would often place a small object in their bed to see if they were a true princess or prince. Some even kept a small pea or other object under their pillows for good luck. The tradition had taken on a life of its own, evolving and changing over the years. Sometimes people would use the test as a way to judge the character of their friends and loved ones. Other times, it was a way to prove to themselves that they were worthy of greatness. And still, others used it as a way to honor the memory of the prince and princess who had started it all. Through it all, the legend of the pea continued to bring joy and laughter to the people of the kingdom. It was a reminder that even the smallest things could have a big impact, and that true beauty came from within. And though the prince and princess had long since passed, their legacy lived on in the hearts and minds of their people, inspiring them to be kind, authentic, and true to themselves.